evening again, everybody. This is Brian Bragg and Mr. Betcher breaking down security.
Hey.
The week of February the 20th. Well, no, not the 20th. What was it, the 17th or something? Anyway.
Does it matter?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. So, this week is going to be part 2 of our interview with Michael Gough, malware researcher, security researcher here in Austin. We were recording outside at the Waterloo bar and grill kind of place, which was really nice.
Yeah, I was listening to it in the car, and I hear these birds and stuff, and I'm like, what?
Yeah, I heard the car. I think at one point it was like, and I was like, oh, okay. So yeah, it was kind of interesting to hear all that. So, so it's been a heck of a week. Been kind of weird.
Yeah.
Been kind of weird at my house where my wife took a job with a company up in Seattle area, and we're going to be moving there next week. So by the time you hear this, we will probably have finished our pack out and flying with our 3 cats to Seattle. So I'm leaving Mr. Betcher here by himself. Just a dish of water and some food in the corner with some newspaper. He's got
and a litter box. Just in case.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. So, but we'll still have podcasts. We're going to try to make sure that we don't have any interruptions. Next week's going to be a real good one. We're going to have part 1 of our interview with Kevin Johnson. Yeah, from Secure Ideas. This was a podcast interview we did during our Sec 542 course. Part 1's actually going to be a bit more comical than part 2. We were trying to get him to another speaking engagement, and Mr. Betcher was driving and navigating, so that was kind of fun. And then, of course, we had to haul ass back from the speaking engagement, so we were trying to get back as quickly as possible. So, so the second part is going to be talking about more of Michael Gough's tool, Sniper Forensic Toolkit. We asked him questions about how it compares to Tripwire. Mr. Betcher had some questions. What were some of the things you asked him?
I don't remember, honestly.
Okay. I know at the start of the podcast you had a question. I couldn't remember what it was. So, and then
let's get right. Let's get right into it.
Okay, that's cool.
Okay, here's part 2 of our interview with malware slayer Michael Gough. Have you explored mobile device malware?
I'm not a big fan of mobile malware. I think it's more FUD than reality. I know that Android's 10 million strong now, but for the most part, phones are easily flashed. If anybody's really concerned about mobile malware, just flash your phone every week or month, because you're going to plug it into your PC and then update it afterwards, and it's going to resync, like my iPhone. I can, flash my iPhone at any point in time, plug it in my PC, and I'm going to be exactly like I was before whatever it is I thought was fishy.
So it's very VM-like, where you've got
It's very
a snapshot,
VM-like, yeah. I just don't think this is as big as issue as it's being made out to be, because you can flash it. And if you really are concerned about security and you don't want that kind of risk, then don't allow Android phones until Google steps up the game and gets a trusted store, or of course everybody's going to say, we'll use MDM software so nobody can install anything. That's an option as well. But the fact that you're installing MDM software is because there's a fundamental flaw worse than Windows. 10 million for an Android phone, really? Worse than Windows in that it's real easy to write this stuff. It's small, it's quick, it's, anybody clicks on anything in a phone, and Android pretty much lets users install anything from anywhere.
Well, the other thing is, for the longest time, cell phone providers were not giving out the latest versions of Android, so the marketplace was severely fragmented. You had Android 2 up to Android 4.4 or whatever, and you find vulnerabilities, but you've got an old phone that's not going to get pushed an update or something. So
look at the comparison between Android updates for all the phones in the last 4 years and compare it to Apple. There are no lingering Apple versions. Every one of the Android phones except the very one that came out last week has an older version of Android running.
Yep.
There's no update path for any of the providers because they mess up the telco providers' tweaks to the phone that they do, and that's a fundamental flaw.
Yeah.
I mean, you really think that the average user, when they get that little pop-up, this app is going to utilize these things, microphone and their contacts, and they just say, yep. We've been so conditioned to hit OK for any pop-up that it is just a flawed way of doing it. You literally just don't have to say, just don't allow it. Just stop. Create a secure version that just says stop.
But isn't Apple creating like a planned obsolescence where they go, okay, we're going to support the phone for 4 releases, and then you're going to have to upgrade your phone?
How many pieces of malware are available on Apple? Compare
Are there?
that to Android. Not many.
Not many?
Not many.
But there still are some.
Yeah, I'll take a handful over 10 million any day. Because I'm sure there's a handful that some of the NSA people know about that none of us have heard about.
Yeah.
But that's really what it comes down to. Just flash your phone. What's the big deal?
Yep.
What are some important steps that you can take in the corporate environment to help fight malware? Like, let's say you're a consultant, you're going into a new company, and they've got nothing.
Well, if you got nothing, then you have some money. The number one thing, this has been said by every Verizon report and that's investigated a breach. TrustWave said it as well. The data about the breach was in the logs. No one's looking. If you're not logging, you're not doing it right. Mm-hmm. So a big step this year to kick up some blue team education at B-Sides Austin 2014, March 20 and 21st, there's my plug, is we have a 2-hour workshop with myself and Jim Broom doing a Catch Me If You Can. He's going to do the red team portion. Here's what I would do to pen test and hack into your company. And I'm going to then do, with a little help from my friends, the blue team defense against that. So we'll basically start there. The other is a 2-hour workshop, maybe actually a 4-hour workshop on the day prior to B-Sides, so a little slip for people out there listening. We may actually open it up to really be able to get in the details here, is enable logs. Default logs in Windows don't tell you anything. But if you turn on logs with the CPU power and the horsepower and disk size we have these days, and you just collect it locally, let alone, and somebody, a consultant or anybody else going on the local machine, looking at the local logs, yes, using W-Event util and querying it out manually, which we'll be sharing in the workshop as well, how to do that. But we'll be utilizing Splunk quite a bit because it's free for everybody. And doing that alone, you can detect a service being installed, you can detect a run key being changed, a file being dropped in key locations, you can look at failed logins, more importantly, successful logins, you can monitor your accounts, and you literally can baseline that box so that when something different occurs, your logs will report it. And the question is, set up your alerts accordingly so they're actionable. This occurs, I need to act upon it.
We talked about that in our podcast 2 weeks ago about what to log, how to log, what events are, how do we keep the enterprise from getting bogged down in quagmire of useless logs to so that we actually can see what is actionable or what needs to be actionable and what is just like, oh yeah, that's just Bob logging into regular items.
Well, the actionable alerts obviously are stuff that the blue teamers have to know. Some of that we hope to teach at B-Sides this year. And things like new services being installed. I would say that's a very high priority for any server, for example. Again, very static. Once you build a server, not a lot changes unless you patch it. Sure. So watch services on servers for sure. Obviously, users can install a lot because we have a lot of developers, a lot of administrators, so they can install just about anything they want. But even then, their behavior is fairly deterministic. If you've got some, NVV router service installing on a bunch of workstations and all of a sudden you realize, well, we're not running NVIDIA video, then it would be kind of suspicious that this one account is crawling across multiple systems installing the service. And that stuff sticks out pretty quickly. So your alerts generally per hour, or in some cases faster, should be set up in such a way they don't go off unless there's something actually actionable. So the quagmire of logs sits there for investigation purposes, but you tweak them so that when you get them, it's quick to look at it and say, yep, that's normal. You adjust your alerting a little tighter, and away you go. Yeah. If a file shows up in C Windows, System32, WBM, that alert goes to everybody on the IT team, and they're all told they better call me immediately. There is no file of an executable nature that show up in WBM without a patch or a function being added to a server. None, zero, no explanation for it. The number one place for DLL injection. So you turn that on in file auditing level at within Windows, and you send that log up at 4663 to whatever you want to use to gather your logs. You will see these files drop. If you turn it on for C Windows System32 WBM.
Yeah.
And there's only a handful of directories you really need to look at as part of that. And then you got other tools that can look at other directories. Watch your SQL Server directories. Anywhere there's an executable, they can drop a DLL and potentially inject you.
And the reason you put it in WBM or like Windows Temp is so that the UAC, the user action, doesn't come up when you're running those?
Well, when you're in as administrator, it won't anyway. So yeah, they try to do that. Most of the user-based malware is installed in the app data directory structure or the program data directory structure because there is no UAC. The user will never be prompted for anything executing. The system level from a Windows perspective, also same thing won't occur unless you're a user trying to gain access to that. And they'll wait till some administrator logs onto the box, or they'll use an exploit to get administrator access. But once they're an administrator, you can put stuff in the Windows directory structure and not get prompted. The reason they put it in WBM more than anything is the WMI service starts and stops all the time, so it's a perfect injection point. Every time that thing starts, the DLL that's called by WMI is sitting right next to it, and it says, oh, load me. And they literally use real DLLs that they'll copy to a PE infect to, bypass what the DLL really does, jump to the end, or anywhere in the DLL, doesn't matter where, but jump to the end to call their bad DLL. So you'll have a copy of a real DLL from the System32 directory. They tweak it, drop it in WBM, right next to it's their bad payload, and right next to that's probably an encrypted file, bad payload. And then when WMI starts up, bam, they're infected. They don't even have to actually do anything but get the files in the box. That's the scary part. Get an administrative access, drop some files, wait.
So on the lines of the exploits, you were in the audience when Katie Masuris came and spoke at the ISSA conference.
I was.
You were mentioning, who runs EMET in the business context. Do you think EMET is a good tool?
No. So again, they're trying to add something to patch a problem. I recently listened to somebody who submitted to Microsoft, but it's not in their bounty program, that found 12 bypasses for EMET. And so, or EMET, depending on how you want to say it. So from that perspective, just trying to stick something on there, and if you've ever used it, by default it doesn't do a lot. You have to now spend a lot of engineering effort to make it do and watch a lot of things.
Yeah.
And that's like custom crafting for every unique workstation an EMET policy, and I don't see that as all being the right way to do it.
So it's like a GPO, but a security GPO kind of thing.
Sort of, yeah. I got to add this program, and I got to add that program, and I got to add this program, and then it watches that memory space and basically notifies you that something's crazy. But I don't see that as a really good solution. I think it's another attempt at patching, and the last version's not a whole lot more friendly. And until it gets really user friendly, I don't think its adoption is going to be very high.
Yeah. So
you'd be better off doing whitelisting.
Whitelisting?
Which is complicated enough to install in non-static environments.
All right. So you have a tool you've created called the Sniper Forensic Toolkit.
Yes. Free to anybody who wants to try it.
We took the day-long course. We liked it, but at the end of the day, we were like, how's that any different than Tripwire?
It's completely different than Tripwire. So Tripwire does not watch the entire disk. That's the first thing everybody needs to understand about Tripwire, or any other file integrity software. It does not watch the entire disk. For example, one of the most highly utilized spots to launch malware on a Windows box is C Windows Temp. Tripwire, by default, does not monitor C Windows Temp. The reason for that is they have scripts that they run to do their checks, and that's where they write and drop their files. So if you monitor C Windows Temp, Tripwire will trip itself, and it's quite noisy. Also, Tripwire doesn't watch the box in real time, what we would consider real time. It's real time from a perspective, it's a time slice. So there is an amount of time that somebody can write a file and execute it without Tripwire ever detecting it.
Wow.
That's not what we're doing. What we're doing is specifically looking at the entire disk through either it occurring, when it occurs. The tool that you played with was a scan of the disk, so we scan once a day in this case for the free version. And anything new that's sitting there is compared against what was there, and if it's new, then you get an alert. It also has options to upload to VirusTotal, and we apply intelligence to it. So we don't care what it is or where it is on the disk. Tripwire does. Tripwire has a concept of stop points. We do not. And the problem with stop points is it's very common that you go into a directory, it makes a lot of noise. SQL Server is a great example, and you stop point the SQL Server directory and beyond because you don't want all that recurring noise. The problem is if there's an executable there and they drop a DLL, you've just excluded its discovery. So Tripwire requires a skilled set to set it up properly. Ours is literally no configuration. You install the product, you stick it on there, you go to a console, and then you decide what it is you actually installed, what you trust, what you want to defer, and you baseline your systems. And then once you baseline those and you get it all clean, you can infect a box all day long, and that will give you every file that's an executable associated with it. Much different solution. Thinner, easier. An IT person can manage this thing, and Tripwire is definitely an InfoSec only kind of person.
Sure.
So there's a big difference between our product and a Tripwire.
Okay. So you mentioned VirusTotal. Did I not hear you tell us that you were not a fan of VirusTotal?
What I said is, you got to be careful. If you upload a piece of APT that someone's targeting you with, and you actually upload that file, and it then gets evaluated, the bad guys are checking the SHAs in the repository, because you can make a request. If you notice when you get the results of VirusTotal, there's a SHA of 256 in the URL. And so you can make a query on that, just to say, do you know about me? Do you know about me? And just ask for the SHA. We do the same thing. And if their SHA shows up, they now know somebody detected them. And so from that perspective, it's early warning system for the malwareans that are doing stuff that's well crafted. The other thing is it is virus stuff. I mean, bottom line is they do not have everything under the sun in the repository. So and there's a lot of mediocre virus scanners out there that will pick up. I'll give you a great example. One of the APTs we picked up deleted a fake file I had created. This happened to be Malwarebytes. Called linkinfo.dll that I created in the Windows directory. It's nothing more than a text file. It triggered and told me it was a virus. Because they are getting to the point, they're so lazy or gathering information from other virus vendors that they went alone off of the name of the file and the location to determine whether it was a virus or not. That's a terrible way to do it. And it's a great example of how viruses is broken. So you'll get some false results in VirusTotal, and I think it's a false sense of security. So if something isn't positive, does that mean it's not bad? Right. I would say the complete opposite. If you're somebody like me and you upload something to VirusTotal because you want them to know that you know, then you realize the good stuff never shows up in VirusTotal. There's also the concept of basically secret positive hits in the virus companies. They're paid by companies themselves, but investigations, government agencies, whomever, where we won't see the trigger of a positive, but it will trigger on the back end to notify whomever they're working with, defense contractor, government, whomever, to notify them that this was found and be able to then grab the IP, obviously, and potentially go investigate it. So there's even that being discovered on the back end that we would never see as a user of VirusTotal. But it does validate when something is found. If it lights up like a Christmas tree, 5 hits or more from reputable vendors, you're pretty certain that file is fishy, and you can take action upon that. So it does have a value from that perspective. But just because it doesn't show up does not mean it's not malware, because I can tell you every piece of APT we've thrown in there, 0 hits. We have a less than 3% detection rate. And the only reason it's that high is because they fish us with malware that triggers on some AV, but not on the one we use. So they know what we know, therefore they know they can fish us with that flaw.
So wait, which is the one you use? Because we should probably be using that one then.
The virus one?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter which one you use. I actually don't rely on them at all.
Yeah.
I honestly don't rely on them at all. They go off great, but for the most part I rely on logging and configuration management to monitor my environment. So not AV.
Your SFT doesn't require any kind of external, like you going up to a server to grab a definition file or
nope.
An update or anything. It's all self-contained in the enterprise.
Yep. It's just an agent that runs on a box that schedules currently the free version every day. The enterprise version will be a live item, so when a file gets dropped, it gets evaluated immediately. And that information is then sent up to a console you can review independently or enterprise-wide. So POS is a perfect example where this tool is phenomenal for it. You build a fresh POS, vendor gives you this fresh POS, you build this thing, you take it off the wire. You wait for an update to come, you plug it in, you update the thing, you run our console, it scans, run our agent, restart our agent, scans it, throws it up to the environment. You say, yep, I just installed this stuff, you trust it, and now every agent on all the other POSs, if any malware showed up that was written to disk, would immediately show up, within minutes, show up in the console and then send you an email alert. So from that perspective, static scenarios are really easy to defend.
wow, it sounds so easy. Why haven't the other organizations done this before?
Because we have to train everybody.
Oh.
We unfortunately chase compliance, and compliance doesn't make us really good security people. It makes us paper pushers, checkbox checkers, and implementers of security tools, but not actually really good security engineers or blue teamers.
Yeah, you mentioned the checkbox thing. It's how we feel sometimes where we work at a company that we cannot mention at this time. So you do a lot of forensics. You do a lot of malware research. What kind of tools do you use? You said, I believe during lunch you use VMware quite a bit because you can just blow away the instance if you get infected or
but they look to see whether you're running malware or not, or whether you're running VMware. They'll actually look for VMware tools being installed, and they'll kill their malware. So we've had some where the malware all of a sudden disappears. So they're looking for that condition because they don't want to be evaluated. So that's pretty common. But yeah, we utilize that, and that tells us something. I just clicked on this, and away it goes. Yeah. A big product I can say everybody should have in their arsenal, and you guys owe me lunch and a beer for sure over this. Is Carbon Black. Not you guys, but the listeners.
Oh, right on.
If you want to see what a piece of malware does, very similar to what output you might see on Tripwire, you bring up a Carbon Black server, which is the back end, and then you bring up a bare bones or VM. But if you really want to make it act like it and not worry about the VM scenario of the malware deleting itself, is a bare bones XP box, Windows 7 box, whatever you got, 2008, and you launch the malware that you have on it, or the files that you found, and drop them on there and wait till they inject. Mm-hmm. And Carbon Black will show you everything that it does. It'll show you what files got dropped in the course of somebody opening an executable. It'll show you what reg keys happened, what IPs it's going out to, and give you a real quick snapshot about what happened, which allows you to then tweak your defenses to look at it. It's an awesome tool, and for a 10-user license, very cost effective for the speed in which it allows you to evaluate malware to determine whether or not I need to log or Splunk for something else, or tweak a tool I already have.
Yeah. So that's who makes Carbon Black?
Carbon Black, the company's name's Carbon Black.
Carbon
and the product's
Black,
Carbon Black.
Self-titled. All right.
Yep. That's a really good tool. Obviously all the typical kit type stuff, SigCheck, strings, Process Explorer, Process Monitor, all those in your typical toolkit. Though the malwareans definitely write hooks to block the output of those. So you sometimes have to use Process Hacker instead of Process Explorer. So you need a myriad of things to do to be able to see stuff. The DOS commands sometimes work real well, but sometimes the behavior of the box tells you something's funky there.
Yeah.
And again, if you can't quickly get to it, the whole goal of defense and respond is identify, contain, and eradicate. And if you can't get to a conclusion, you think something's fishy there, or some trigger went off that you're like, but I can't find it, just reimage the box.
Yeah.
Move to the mentality that you can be sure if you reimage the box, you're clean. So that is, in my opinion, a very strong tool. Reimage, move on, you got bigger fish to fry. Logging tools, pick one. I don't care who it is. I'm a fan of Splunk. You should enable and configure your logs. Nobody does it, and very few do it. We're going to definitely teach people how to do that at B-Sides. Huge benefit. I mean, again, you turn on what I turn on, there's not much you can do to the box without doing something in the log.
Yeah.
And if you're offloading it, then clearing the log is an indicator, but they, again, only clear the local log. It's already been sent off to a syslog server of some type.
Yeah.
So it's a real valuable tool as well.
Plus, if you're auditing, the fact that the log got cleared should be showing up as a log entry by itself, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And our tool obviously is a real good one too, because I can throw an agent on a box, let it scan the entire box. We already have stuff that Ian and I do that eliminate the stuff that we know about, and I can very quickly find any hidden malware on a box that's on disk using our tool. So from a quick perspective, all of what I mentioned is easily an hour's worth of work. Mm-hmm. And that's huge compared to doing forensics and just duping your disk and all that.
So you mentioned putting your something additional like your Sniper Toolkit or whatever on a POS system. What about all these point of sale systems that are ran by the mom and pops who may not necessarily have a support team or an IT person, or is just, I want to be able to run credit cards, so I'm going to set this up? I mean, how do you get that kind of adoption from those kinds of folks who may not even know, who don't know about you or know why they should be doing this?
And they, for the most part, really aren't going to care, right?
Yeah.
I just had a conversation with the place we eat that just installed 2 of these Micros XP POS systems, and they got them from Restaurant Depot. They sell them. They're a reseller of these things. Oh. And the advice I would give to anybody in that scenario is make sure if you run in these POSs, which do have reporting, do queue up to some other service, You can pay to have them monitored and everything else through this micro solution provider, and keep them off the network that you have your PCs on. Number one, just don't have two networks. It's not hard to install two routers and make sure that stuff that's on the POSs does not see in any way, form, or manner the PCs you may have in the office that employees are surfing on.
Well, it's way easier to hook it up to the restaurant wireless.
Yeah, it is, but unfortunately it poses a risk. So from that perspective, that's what you do. And again, for a restaurant owner, it's not real expensive to ask the vendor to say, reimage these things for me. I want to be sure. And then make these simple changes. This is a pretty inexpensive fix. I got a cable modem coming in. I split it and I send it to two different wireless devices or Ethernet devices. I hardwire mine into one. It goes to the switch that goes out to the internet, and the other one, and they don't see one another.
Make your bubble.
Yeah, make a little bubble, and that's really all they need to care about. Okay. Just don't surf with computers, and quite frankly, get an iPad solution. Until they start highly exploiting those, which they will at some point, I'm sure.
Aren't they just putting Square out the yin?
Yeah, Square, and I've seen some of these. They're pretty good. They don't do all the reporting and recipe things that these people like to do on some of these things. And the one I talked about said, yeah, it just doesn't have all the function I need. And that's what it's all about, the function of it, which is why people run Windows. It's easier to write stuff, a lot more developers out there. But seriously consider going to a different solution. Like the iPad or even a Linux-based micros instead of the Windows-based.
Well, you mentioned micros. How many POS system companies are there out there?
I don't think there's a whole lot now. A lot of people have been acquired. IBM bought several. Micros is obviously one of the bigger ones. Squirrel's another one I've seen.
I was going to say ATMs. There's only a handful of ATM manufacturers now. A lot of them make ballot voting machines too.
Yep.
Which is odd.
So stay away from the Windows or isolate the Windows POSs, or any unique kind of kiosk thing you have is the best alternative.
All right.
Glue every port shut on your. We constantly talk about when I go to healthcare places and they, turned everything around and made it so you have to walk up to this booth, but then there's USB ports facing me, and going, oh, great,
Yeah.
So yeah, keep that stuff away from people like you and me.
Okay. So, B-Sides is coming up, and
Thursday, Friday, March 20th and 21st.
Oh wow, it's just around the corner. I won't be here though. But,
You enjoy that rain.
Huh. Yeah, well, so you can still get tickets, or is it just like...
Yeah, no, we pretty much will not sell out. We have a venue that's big enough to hold about 700 people. I doubt I'll get that many.
Okay. But
yes, you can go to B-Sides Austin or keepsecurityweird.com and hit the registration link and go ahead and sign up for your almost free $10 a day ticket to reserve your spot.
Wow.
And you'll get swag and potentially food. Come on, sponsors.
So other than B-Sides Austin, are you speaking anywhere else? I know you did ISSA.
Yeah, I got a local fraud group here is going to have me speak. I'm going to talk to them about malware a little bit, and I have some other papers outstanding that haven't got accepted yet.
Awesome. All right. You have anything else, Mr. Betcher?
I'm good.
Yeah.
Glad we were able to sit down and talk with you.
Yeah, and it only bribed you with lunch, so that was pretty good.
You can bribe me with beer.
Well,
beer's
we
more
could have
expensive.
had some liquid refreshment. You were walking over there, so... all right. Well, we appreciate it, Michael. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. All right. So that was the end of Michael Gough and his interview. We actually want him to come back more often. During part one, though, actually, we kind of... I guess it would be called a rookie mistake. We were editorializing a bit about his opinions, and he called us on them, which we thought was cool because, one, we got feedback. And I say we, I think a lot of it was me. I think I was making opinions about things that he may, or inferences about things he may have said that were, not necessarily his actual opinion. So, we're learning from that. We're going to try to do non-editorializing as much as possible, kind of keep it even keel. So, I liked his interview. He talked a lot about the log files and the question you asked about malware. He doesn't believe malware on mobile devices is a big deal.
Right, because you can just flash it at whatever point you think you're going to get, or whatever point you think you're infected, flash it, and you're good to go. Kind of like, re-imaging, your desktop.
Yeah, or reverting to a snapshot in a VM.
Yeah, snapshot.
Yeah, and he was talking about how he prefers. He has an Android phone, doesn't he?
No,
he didn't have an Android phone.
Not on him. No, he was using the Apple.
Oh, it was an iPhone. Okay, I couldn't remember if it was he had a fancy case on it, and I never understand those things. So he is not a fan of the Android phone. As you heard in the, because it was 10 million, he said it was like 10 million units or something. There was way more malware on Android than there was on the iPhone. And I found that quite intriguing. That doesn't mean there isn't, malware on iPhone. Maybe we just haven't found it yet. Maybe it's still hidden. So, the other thing we talked about the logging and the events and the actionable events.
Yeah, he thinks he's I think in the interview he said he's going to give up the endpoint, and once he's all about detection. He's going to get an alert at some point when somebody does break in, and he's going to act upon it. He's got his environment completely under control.
Yeah.
The way it sounds.
Well, he talks about giving up the endpoint. I think he's going to give up the endpoint because that's not where the data is. That's where the user is. If you give up the endpoint, then you have less of an attack surface to deal with. If you, let's say you deal with credit card data, does it make sense to secure all the users' computers and not the servers where the data is located? Because that's your money right there. Your money's not with the users, not with your Windows laptop that your developer has. It's making sure that data doesn't get either exfiltrated, used in a malicious manner, or some guy from Bulgaria or whatever logs into your I'm sorry for our listeners in Bulgaria. We have a lot of them, I'm sure. Or, they hack into our web app and get away. So you want to be able to reduce your attack surface by, kind of bubble. He talked about it in part one, actually, bubbleizing your network.
Well, I think some organizations have a hard outer shell, but then once you break through, it's soft and mushy, kind of like an egg. You break the shell, there's gold on the inside, just waiting to come out, right?
Yeah.
So I think in his environment, what he protects, it's very hard on the inside and a gooey outside.
Yeah. I don't even know what would that be? Would it be like a peach or something? You got the hard nugget, or the
right?
The pit on the inside that's hard as a rock, and then you've got the soft outer sweet edge that's tasty good.
Yeah, it's not like a Tootsie Pop.
Yeah.
It's more like a peach.
Yeah.
Soft on the outside, rock hard on the inside, And yes, we are big in Bulgaria.
I know, right?
So I hear.
Yeah, we've done gangbusters this month. We thanks to our listeners and word of mouth and social media, we've made over 500 listens this month. And we really appreciate everybody listening. Going back to what we were talking about earlier with the logging and we just had found an article literally a couple of minutes before we did the podcast about Neiman Marcus, and we talked about Neiman Marcus and Target and Michael's a little bit in the interview. They had apparently Neiman Marcus had found, and in the postmortem, their investigation, that 60 million log events.
I don't know. Hey, let me look it up real quick.
I want to say
anyway,
keep
talking.
Yeah, it was like a massive amount of log events that, if they had been paying attention and had the actionable, if they had set up their logging properly and said, okay, this doesn't look right, they may have been able to head off the breach that occurred with them. Now, to be fair, if I remember in the article correctly, 60 million
60,000.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so it wasn't million; it was actually 1,000.
60,000 alerts while bagging credit card data.
Okay, so 60,000 is, what'd they say, less than 1% of the amount of logs they get every day?
I don't know.
Yeah, so I think that's what I read anyway. But yeah, that would be hard even if you were, filtering everything just so. I mean, you would have to have a dedicated person watching your logs, looking for, something odd, I think.
Yeah, think back to the alerts and events podcast we did. They had the infrastructure in place to detect, the nefarious ne'er-dwellers.
Yep.
But, no, they didn't set it up correctly on the alerting side.
Yeah. And that really ended up biting them in the ass. The other thing I think the article said was the people that got into Target is an entirely different group that attacked Neiman Marcus.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they said the code's different, the MO's different. I would like to see more, maybe a different article, written about this from somebody else to maybe get a more well-rounded idea from the report. But yeah, I mean, there was a lot going against Neiman Marcus anyway. I mean, 60,000 alerts sounds like a lot, but if you get several 100 million a day from your server environment, those are going to, it's not like you've got this big massive red flashing light that tells you something is wrong. You're going to have to pick up on little nuances, little breadcrumbs, very little breadcrumbs.
Well, it's the difference between events and alerts. You can get millions of events.
That's right.
But the alerts are what you need to act upon.
When that happens,
the article says 60,000 alerts.
Okay, so there may have been several million events coming in every second, and inside of them, one or two different alerts were popping up. Boy, it would suck if they had been conditioned after so many false positives to just kind of disregard anything that was coming across the wire. That would have not been very good.
Yeah. I mean, maybe we'll do talk about that again. The incident response, alerting, and all that.
Yeah, I think we need to maybe get somebody, interview them who does incident response for a living and, interview them. Maybe find somebody who's been in the trenches that had to deal with the incident response because, I've been doing this for 10 years and, my incident response was mostly operational, like, a website's gone down or, AD server's down, so we can't connect. I haven't really done a lot of incident response in that regard.
You mean in the security realm?
Yeah, in the security realm, like, there's been a data breach. I haven't done hardly any of that at all.
Well, did you get a chance to test out the Sniper Forensic Toolkit? I did.
You did?
I built a VM, put Windows on it, then updated it to Windows 8.1.
Mm-hmm.
Tested it out on a fresh install on a VM. Looks pretty cool. It's different. I can see how it can be used, like he said, with embedded devices.
Mm-hmm.
He said his tool would be perfect for that. I can definitely see that. I had a couple of things that were alerted to me, and I could go on his website and see all my data there, as far as statistics. And then I found out that I had 3 things in Windows.old that were questionable. So I found out what Windows.old was. Well, I guess Windows puts all the old stuff from Windows 8, sticks it in Windows.old right next to the Windows directory as it's installing Windows 8.1. So I'm like, well, I don't need this. This is a fresh install. I've done nothing to this machine yet. I'll just delete it. Well, I couldn't delete it. I had to. It said something like, "Oh, you're administrator, but you have to be trusted installer in order to delete this." So I dug deeper, tried to delete individual directories. Oh, you have to be system in order to delete this one. So I went back to my old Windows. Was it Windows 2000 where I discovered you could actually move something and then delete it? So I moved the entire directory to my desktop. Just copy paste or cut paste. So then I tried to delete it from there, and it told me, oh, you're not B. Betcher. You're administrator. You can't delete this. I'm like, what? Are you serious? God. Oh, man. So frustrating.
So how did you eventually get rid of it, or
No, it's still sitting there on the desktop. I need to figure out some way to delete Windows.old. So I've got all these internal directories from Windows.old on my I got like 8 directories on my desktop because I kept on copying and pasting it, or cutting and pasting it, sorry.
You know what the definition of insanity is, right?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
And I don't know. I'm going to research some easy way to delete Windows.old. I hope there's an easy way to do that.
Oh, I know how to do it. I already did the research on it. Apparently, you're supposed to put metal armor on, go up to the tallest tower in Austin, Texas, which would be the Austonian, during a thunderstorm, hold your, laptop in the air, and then once it's struck by lightning, then you won't have any more problems.
Well, you won't have any more problems. I thought about throwing my Windows machine out the window, but I guess then it wouldn't be a Windows machine, or would it? I don't know.
Irony abounds. So
Maybe that's why they call it Windows.
That's why they call it Windows. Anyway. Yeah, because it looks fancy. So, wow. So, yeah, I'm sure there's an answer out there. If one of you malwareans or nefarious ne'er-do-wellers have an understanding of Windows 8 enough to tell us how to delete Windows.old. I bet it's just safe mode, dude. I bet if you just went into safe mode, you could delete anything.
Permissions don't apply in safe mode?
I don't believe so, because you don't have to have a password in safe mode. I think you're a system at that point.
Yeah, but I'm not trusted installer. I'm system. So I won't be able to delete the trusted installer files.
Yeah. It didn't give you an option to delete that stuff after the fact?
You would think administrator would be able to do anything, but apparently not. Not anymore.
Well, maybe a security feature of Windows 8,
It's dumbed down too much. I mean, in Linux, you want to delete the kernel? Sure, you know what you're doing.
That's true. There is a certain amount of empowerment there. That's also probably why malware is so. He said it wasn't as difficult to find because all things run with a PID in Linux, so all processes just need to be accounted for.
Right.
So
right. He said that.
That level of complexity in Windows actually is a detriment to finding malware.
I think Windows has gone too far. They said, well, we need to protect you from yourself, so we're going to put all these controls in place, and then you can't do anything in it.
Yeah.
If you know what you're doing, you can't do it.
Well, they had to pare it back because the UAC, when it first came out on Windows, Vista, it was a nightmare. I used Vista for about 2 weeks, and everything I did required a UAC hit every time. Screen dimmed, it was nearly made the thing unusable. So they're trying to make it better. Unfortunately, everybody is painting Windows 8 to be like the odd Star Trek movie number, like 3 or 5, which was god awful, But I find I don't have a problem with Windows 8. Maybe I'm just the only person in the room here I am the only person in the room, but I don't hate Windows 8. I just think it's different, and that scares people.
Scares me.
Yeah.
Not really.
No. Okay.
I just find it difficult to use sometimes, like in that case.
Yeah.
I just want to delete that stuff that's not important anymore.
Yeah.
But I can't.
Well, I'm telling you, the safe mode bit, I'll bet you be able to do that. Or you just do some internet searching for delete Windows old, Windows 8, that kind of thing.
Yeah, you don't think I did?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, I just have to dig deeper and spend more time on it. That's all.
Okay. Well, we are Brian and Brian. This was episode 6.2, part 2, episode 6, part 2 of breaking down.
However you want to distinguish it.
Yeah.
Enumerate it.
Yeah, there you go. 6.2 of breaking down security. We'll come at you next week, hopefully with part 1 of Kim and Johnson. everyone have a good week, and we'll talk to you later.
See ya.